Well, good morning. This is the last in our series of Proverbs and Song of Solomon. And we won't have one the following Sunday. And I will start Isaiah on the Sunday after that. So get your books and we'll be in Isaiah for our next study. So we'll have this one, we'll be off next Sunday, and then we'll start the following Sunday. We're in Song of Solomon chapter 5, and we're continuing with this poem that is written really by Solomon and his wife, and it's a poem as they both express their love for one another. Understand this, there's two works here. One is an illustration of a man and a woman in their courtship and in their marriage. The second one is the relationship between Christ and his church. Never forget this, Christian. Your marriage is a walking, talking example of how Christ and his church should be unified. So always understand that. The marriage itself deserves tremendous investment by both parties for the marriage itself's sake. And it is sometimes, I always tell people, the secret to a great success for a marriage is that the marriage has to supersede either person in it. The institution of marriage has to be holy, because it is holy between two Christians. It is a facade between any other union of non-Christian men and women. That's why I think the state should get out of the business of marriage. It has no business in it. It's a church, spiritual union. Outside of that, I don't really care who it is. I mean, they go back and we have these big debates on who can get married and what about this person or that person. That doesn't affect me. The state shouldn't get in it. This is a religious, spiritual union. So as we study this, there's a lot of parallels going on. So always understand that there's a undercurrent between Christ and his church. And a lot of times when the woman speaks of her love and her obsession with her husband, that's how the church should review Christ. And as the husband talks about protecting and loving his and sacrificing for his wife, that's Christ's relationship to his church. So as we look at this is a whole lot more than just a poem talking about the intimacy between a man and a woman somewhere. It is that, but it is also an illustration of how a godly marriage and courtship should take place. First off is that courtship has to be valid. You have to be a man and they have to be a woman, and they both have to be Christians, because a spirit cannot unify a Christian with an unchristian or two unchristians. God the Father just doesn't do that. It has to be a spiritual endeavor. The Spirit has to be indwelling in a man and a woman to make a marriage what it needs to be. You know, think about investments. When you're young, when Henry and I first got married, or when you're a young guy, you invest in crazy things. You save up your money for a pair of shoes. You save up your money for going to the movies. You invest in what makes you feel good on the short term. Some young boy may save up his money for a skateboard today. When he gets older, he saves up his money and invests in automobiles, or maybe a boat or something short like that. And young people invest in their career. They go to school and they sacrifice their time. They invest in career. And people who are successful invest in careers. They do the work. They go to school. They get the good grades. They get trained. And they go to work and they're a good employee and they're investing in their career. Not a thing wrong with that. And you should, later on, you wish you had invested in retirement. I know we never think we're going to get old. And sometimes I remember waking up, I remember the day I woke up when I was 50, and I looked around, I looked at Henry, I said, we don't have anything for retirement. I mean, I had a military career, so I did have something. And I said, that's not going to be it. And so we looked around and said, we better start saving really quick for our retirement, or we're going to come up short. And a lot of people will invest in that latter part of their life for that retirement time when there is no extra income coming in. And you got to invest to make sure your houses are paid for and you're debt free. You know, going into retirement with a lot of debt is a disaster. It is a recipe for disaster. So what do you invest in? And what we're going to see here is the poem continues in chapter 5, and we'll be studying 6 through 16, these 10 verses. And we see that the invest in the relationship. All relationships need an investment in them. And we begin reading that. Invest in the union. Because this woman is a beautiful woman. The husband says her beauty is not matched anywhere. He puts her in a chariot and takes her through the streets. He is so proud of her beauty. But understand this, her beauty didn't make her virtuous. Her character did. This is a virtuous woman. Now, she happened to be beautiful also. But at the same time, her virtue came from her character. God may create some women or men more handsome and beautiful than others, but you're in charge of your virtue. You're in charge of your character. And there is no reason that a person can't be a virtuous woman or a virtuous husband. That's a choice of character, not of how you look or you got your grandmother's eyes or your father's hair or lack of it. But we look at this investment. And that's what we look here when we begin reading in verses 6, 7, and 8. Follow with me there. Verse 6, I opened up. Now, understand chapter 5, verse 6. This woman is having a dream. Remember from chapter 3, she's having a dream where she loses her husband. Sometimes in our dreams, in our sleep, our mind will torment us. I don't know about you, but you'll have a dream of being in a struggle and you don't have your strength, or you can't move quick enough, or you're running from a fire and your legs won't work. I don't know what it is about dream life, but sometimes you have just frustrating dreams. And this woman is having one of those dreams. It says, I opened up to my beloved, but my beloved had withdrawn himself, and he was gone. My soul failed when he spake. I sought him, but I could not find him. I called him, but he gave me no answer. The watchmen that went about the city found me. They smote me, they wounded me. The keepers of the walls took away my veil from me. I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him that I am sick of love, sick with love. I'm brokenheartedness. These 3 verses describe a woman who is in a dream missing her husband. He's gone. She don't know where he's at. Let me tell you something about it. If you want to invest in your relationship, one of the most important things you can be is there. Be there. You know, I was in the submarine community for 23 years. 17 of those years were at sea. I wasn't there when I should have been. Now, I'm not against military service, but I want to tell you, it takes its toll on a marriage. Anything that separates a married man and woman takes its toll on the marriage. I don't care how honorable you may think that is. And you men out there that are working 12 hours a day, 8 days a week, and come home, plop into bed, and wake up in the morning, go it again, you're not investing in your marriage. You may be investing in your job. And don't tell me, well, I'm working all this time because, you know, I love my family and I'm working for them. Of course you got to work and you got to provide. But you better take some time. And you better invest that time in your family, because that's one of the most important things. Because here's a woman that's without her husband. And the reason why I know it's a dream, because this is Solomon, the king's wife. Do you really think the watchman's going to molest her? The king's wife, the queen, when she walks out? No. He said no. In her dream, she's not only missing him, but she also goes out and no one is helping her. As a matter of fact, they take away her veil. That word veil is translated, it could be translated shawl or cloak, or the actual veil covering the face. The key point there was that a woman veiled her beauty and kept it for her husband primarily. Women did not expose themselves to the public. Sometimes your wife may come in and say, how do I look in this? And if it's very revealing, you may say, Well, I think you look great, and you look great to me, but you ain't going out of the house like that. Why? Because that beauty is reserved for me and me alone. And so that's what she's talking about here. She said, they took my veil from me. Her veil represented her modesty. A modesty is a veil. Hence, they come down that women, when they go into church, are covered. You say, well, what's that? That links its way back to this very thing that a woman covers herself in church because she's in public then in the worship house, and there should not be a display of beauty in the house. Hence, a lot of women in some churches that believe in this, they'll go out and buy the most elaborate hat they can to draw attention to themselves, totally voiding the Old Testament principle of being covered in a veil. Or when you go in, taking a doll in, platting it on your head doesn't do it. Okay? It may show that you have an attitude of submission and modesty. Don't get me wrong, I'm not condemning those people who may do that. Don't condemn that. Because the principle is solid. But the principle was for that beauty not be shown off irregularly. I think that, so, well, Jim, what about people going swimming? I'm not going to get into that. I don't see anything wrong with a Christian man and woman going and swimming. But I will tell you this. I know a lot of Christian women that when they come out of the ocean or the swimming pool or whatever, they'll put on a veil. It may be a thin something or whatever, but they will cover themselves to a certain degree. And I respect that. I'm not saying you have to do that, but I do respect that. He says, I charge you, O daughters of Jerusalem, if you find my beloved, that you tell him that I am sick with love. She goes out to tell her court. See, a queen had a court of young women. And back in chapter 1, they even adorned the chariot, the marriage chariot, and wove the covering on the seat. And these women really attended her. And they really do whatever the queen asks for. But the answer in verse 9 is rather unique. Why is thy beloved more than another beloved, O thou fairest among women? What is thy beloved more than another beloved, that thou dost charge us? Now all of a sudden these women who work for the queen said, what's so special about him? Now, the reason why I know this is a dream, that's just not realistic for the queen's serving attendants to say, what's so special about the king? They're not going to say that. But what they did, by the Spirit putting this in here, it put the woman in a position to speak about her husband. And this gives me an opportunity to address one of my pet peeves. If the marriage indeed is an illustration of Christ and his church, I would never see the church condemn Christ. And I would never see Christ belittle the church. And so therefore, in the marriage, in public, if you're ever asked about your spouse or given the opportunity to say anything, it better be positive, it better be endearing, it better be flattering, it better be out of a heart of love. Because you are representing, as a woman, the church's love for Christ, and as a man, Christ's love for the church. A man who belittles his wife in public is doing an ungodly thing. It's not that trivial a matter at all. Don't ever do that. And a woman, if you belittle your husband, or if you bring any type of dishonor or question of dishonor to your husband, it's a sin. It's a sin that mars the analogy of the marriage being an example of Christ and his church. Only honor your spouse. That's the reason why God inspired the writer to put in this verse, that these people would go out of character and ask the queen, what's so special about your husband? Because it gave her that opportunity to say what she thought about him. And that's what's recorded in the next 6 or the final 6 verses. It's her testimony of what she thought of her husband. Now, as this description is being laid out, remember, this is the church and how they should see Christ. This is the church defining, at the same time, a woman defining the body and her impression of the presence of her husband. Read with me. Verse 10, my beloved is white and ruddy, the chiefest among 10,000. His head is as the most fine gold. His locks are bushy, and his hair black as a raven. His eyes are the eyes of doves by the river waters, washed with milk and fitly set. Wow, you're talking about a poem. I mean, this is a person. Let's talk about this. I mean, she says, first off, he is a special man. And when 10,000, none will even come close. Gentlemen, don't you wish your wife would say that about you? In 10,000. White and ruddy talks about light. And ruddy talks about the color in his face. And that's critical. That's a call for beauty. And he goes on to say, his head is most fine gold, and his locks are bushy and black as raven. His eyes are the eyes of doves. And it's important. My beloved is white and ruddy, chiefest among 10,000. His head is most fine gold, and his locks are bushy and as black as a raisin. His eyes are the eyes of doves. Doves speak of peacefulness. Wives, I'd like to ask you, have you ever got the evil eye from your husband? Henry says, I have one. She said, she said, when you get angry, you have the meanest look I've ever seen. Well, that's not what this is talking about. This is talking about a man should have a peaceful look, not an angry look at his wife. If you get angry at your wife, go alone, be alone somewhere. I feel like the biggest hypocrite in the world saying this because I don't practice it like I should. But wait till you get control of it. You should never look angrily at your wife. You should have the eyes of doves by the rivers of water. That's peacefulness. That's a picture of peacefulness. Washed with milk. His eyes are clear. The whites are pure, setting off the darkness of the pupil. And fitly set, like the jewels in a fine piece of jewelry. They're not like some people I've seen where they have both eyes on the same side of your nose. And that's an ugly person. His cheeks are a bed of spices and sweet flowers. His lips like lilies, dropping sweet-smelling myrrh. She experienced him. Not only was he good to look at, he smelled pretty good too. And really, that's what they're talking about. They're talking about here that he's really talking about how he smelled. Because back then, people didn't bathe as much as they could, and when they could bathe, they didn't have a lot of water, and they would use certain oils and anointments to make them smell good. Nothing wrong with that. Nothing whatsoever. His eyes are his cheeks are like a bed of spices. Now that appeals to the nose. That's sweet flowers, the smell. You know, I learned early on from my courting days. Clean up, scrub up, and put on some what I call smell 'em. I don't know where I picked that word. I call it smell 'em. Aftershave, cologne, I don't know. Get something and put it on. Now you can get overboard with it. I know we have some people, the wife of one of our class members has an allergy to strong colognes, and they really make her sick to her stomach, and she can't go in a small room where people have a lot of perfume or men have a lot of colognes on. But I would tell you, my grandson, when he got to an age we started dating, I bought him I sent him, I think, a tube of toothpaste, and I bought him some good cologne. I said, son, always smell good. I remember a story I read about Jack Nicholson. He said when he went on the set, he would always take 2 or 3 tubes of toothpaste and brush it. And he said, well, what in the world for? He said, I'm going to tell you. He said, we go into cases, some of these cases, these love scenes, you're going to, you may have 8 or 9 or 10 cuts on it. And he says, nobody wants to be kissing somebody who has bad breath or their mouth smells bad. got a little respect for him. I said, well, at least there's a man considering how that he smells. If there's one thing this mask world has done for us, it's kept a lot of halitosis contained. But it's critical that a man or a woman in the presence of their loved one look and smell good. I've said this before. When we were dirt poor and below the poverty line, first married, before I would come home in the Navy, Henry would go in, make herself up, put on makeup, comb her hair, and meet me at the door. And I would never have thought when I was courting her of going up that house. At that time, I smoked cigarettes, and I know how nasty those things can smell. I would not smoke. I would brush my teeth, brush my tongue. I would gargle Listerine, and I would put on my smellum, and I wouldn't smoke until I went over, and I had my time with her, and I'd be hitchhiking home out of the coal fields in West Virginia. She lived on top of a mountain. And I'd walk down that dirty path, that creek bed she called a road, and reach over to, when I started hitchhiking home, I'd break out my cigarettes and smoke then. That was before I was saved. But I was conscious even then that you take care of yourself. And it says, his hands are as gold rings set with beryl, his belly as bright ivory overlaid with sapphires. You say, man, his legs were as pillars of marble, set up on sockets of fine gold, his countenance as Lebanon. Lebanon was known for the cedars of Lebanon, straight, hard. His stomach was flat and hard. This man took care of himself. She noticed it. She looked at that. This also is an illustration. If you look at this, you'll talk about the illustrations of Christ and what he looks like now. You know one thing, we all are made in the image of God. And God looks a little bit, I don't want to say it that way, we look a little bit like God. If we weren't so fallen, we wouldn't have glasses and look age and losing our hair. And this image doesn't fit after a certain age. There was a time where that, we were in shape and we looked good and we were at the top of our game. But sin entered in through Adam into the human race, and we all fall. Now, when I look at my wife, she's 72. She still is the most beautiful woman I've ever seen. When I was younger, I heard old people say that, and I'd say, you're just saying that. That's an ugly woman. No, she's beautiful. And she's more as beautiful today as she ever was. But as she describes her husband, he is a strong man. His mouth is most sweet. There you go, brush them teeth, boy. He is altogether lovely. This is my beloved, and this is my friend, O daughters of Jerusalem. And I think it's important that she ends this with, not only do I love him, he's my best friend. If your best friend isn't your spouse, your marriage is not right. If your spouse is not your best friend, there's something wrong with your marriage. Let us take this example, read through it on several levels. Understanding the obvious, how to rightfully court a woman, how to honor her, how also a husband and wife should look at each other. The fact that if you want a successful marriage, you better be prepared to invest in it. At the same time, how the church honors Christ and how Christ protects and sacrifices for the church. And that every marriage is a type of Christ and his church. And you don't have a right to distort that. For whatsoever God hath put together, how could man tear it apart? He can't. Thank you very much. This finishes up this series. I'm looking forward to the day we can get back in the classroom. I like interaction. I want to hear from you, not just sit here and talk. God bless you.